Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre shooting down calls to increase domestic oil production and oil drilling as Biden continues to shift the blame for sky-high gasoline prices onto oil companies. Fox News' Peter Doocy pressed the White House Press Secretary on the president's energy policy yesterday. Watch.
We need them to actually refine the crude oil, which is not happening, and that's what we're calling on oil companies to do.
Why not just drill more here in the U.S., though?
Because we don't need to do that.
We don't need to do that, as Exxon Mobil is now firing back at Joe Biden's attacks. The oil company writing they have, quote, been investing more than any other company to develop U.S. oil and gas supplies. Government can promote investment through clear and consistent policy that supports U.S. resource development. That is not what we have had. Joining us right now is former White House Chief of Staff, former OMB Director Mick Mulvaney. Mick, it's great to see you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Thanks for having me back, Maria. Good to see you.
So what do you make? Exxon Mobil pushing back on Joe Biden's attacks, and we know that he continues to say that there are leases that the oil companies are to blame for not taking advantages of those leases and putting more production on the market. What do you say?
Yeah, if you read the letter, it's not surprising. It's exactly what you and I talked about probably a year ago when oil prices first started to go up, which is, how do we deregulate? You read the letter, it says, look, please relieve us of the Jones Act. Please permit more oil pipelines. Do the regulatory things that the Trump administration did, that the Biden administration could do to make it easier to get the oil that we produce to market. And you see Karine Jean-Pierre say, let's just refine more. Because of government regulation, we haven't had a refinery built in this country since the 1970s. So to a certain extent, it's not surprising, as you and I have been talking about for a long time now. What's really surprising, though, Maria, is the letter itself, because Biden didn't write it. Presidents don't write those kinds of letters. It's written by staff. And what this means is that he surrounded himself with people who really don't understand capitalism and the profit motive. They surround himself with people who think the government can wave a magic wand and make people make more things. And that, I think, is more disturbing for the long run.
So who do you think is running the country then?
Oh, it's a chief of staff for sure. Ron Klain, I think, is probably running about 90% of the administrative, the executive branch of the government. Joe Biden, a nice guy, not running the day-to-day operation. And when you have a leader like that who's sort of disengaged, the chief of staff takes on a tremendously important role. Klain is a lot more liberal than Biden has been traditionally. I think that's why you're seeing this whole administration lurch to the left, is because the team they have built is a hardcore left-wing team, and they don't understand. You see a press secretary who says, well, what we just need to do is drill more. That doesn't solve the problem. You see a team blaming corporate greed for inflation when really it's the supply of goods into the marketplace vis-a-vis the amount of dollars chasing those goods. You have folks who don't understand the economy as it works, and that's the thing that worries me, because it doesn't bode well for the next 2 years.
And isn't it true that he's had so many executive orders that has discouraged oil companies from drilling and discouraged working with fossil fuel companies? Look at all the new rules at the Securities and Exchange Commission. And the public knows this. President Biden's approval rating is plummeting. A new Fox News poll finds that 57% of voters disapprove of the job that he's doing as president. 43% say that they approve. The Atlantic writer Mark Leibovich is calling on Biden to not seek re-election in a new opinion piece. He writes, quote, let me put this bluntly. Joe Biden should not run for re-election in 2024. He is too old. President Biden will turn 80 years old in November, Mick.
Yeah, look, you read the article, pretty soon, by the way, you're going to see approval ratings that are about the same of the rate of inflation, and the Democrats see that. I think they're afraid either he loses in 2024 or he wins in 2024. I'm afraid of him winning, especially if he surrounds himself with these same folks. The article, I thought, was well done. It raised a really good question as to whether or not we should have a mandatory retirement age in the White House, in this House, in the Senate, and on the Supreme Court. But generally speaking, what you're seeing is Democrats understand that Biden and this team that he has built cannot get us out of this situation, and they know that the voters know it. If they leave Biden at the top of the ticket, they're going to lose. The difficulty they face is they don't have any bench. If you read the article, it goes on to say that maybe Pete Buttigieg or Chris Murphy or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez could lead the party. That's their bench. That's what they've got. So whereas the Democrats have Ron DeSantis and Tim Scott and Mike Pence, they've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So they're in a difficult situation. They know it. They don't understand inflation. They can't fix it. It's a dark time right now for the Democrat Party, which is why you're seeing all these internal rumblings make it out into the public.
Yeah, Liz Peek wrote about this last week. Go ahead, Liz.
Good morning. Mick, given the terrible approval ratings of the president, it's a pretty good chance that the Republicans take over Congress in the fall, I hope. What can they do to provide clarity and consistency on energy policy, which will encourage the oil industry to feel comfortable investing the billions of dollars required to get back to energy independence, to get our refining capacity up, et cetera? I mean, can that happen if we get that midterm win?
Probably not, and here's why. So much of what governs the oil and gas industry, especially in the short term, is regulatory. It takes a long time for legislative changes to kick in. But the regulations could be changed now. The Jones Act, for example, that Exxon asked to be relieved of, could be changed now. Permitting for the Keystone XL pipeline could go forward now. It doesn't take legislation to do that. It could be very quick. The Democrats will still be in charge of the executive branch. They'll still be in charge of the EPA, the Department of Energy. The important part after the Republicans take control in November, and they will, and Kevin McCarthy is going to be Speaker, is to simply remind people that we do understand economics. We do understand the marketplace. We do understand inflation. We do understand that if you make it easier to get goods to market, it will make everything cheaper, that raising interest rates doesn't create more computer chips or more cars on the lot. It actually makes it harder to do that. And they lay the foundation then for the 2024 election. So it is critical that we have that voice in Washington, D.C. You're going to have it, but keep in mind the presidency, the White House runs so much of the regulatory climate that it's going to be difficult to really change course just because of taking over the House of Representatives.
It's a good point, especially since he can go ahead and continue his executive orders and continue this green agenda.
Correct. The president has a tremendous amount of authority. Keep in mind, you talk about that green agenda. Go back and watch the spokesperson yesterday. She was so uncomfortable asking the question about drilling and so comfortable answering the question about their green agenda. They really don't understand how you produce energy. They don't understand how oil turns from out of the ground and into your car, but they think solar panels are wonderful. That's as frightening as anything I saw this week.
All right, Mick, good to talk with you. Thanks very much. Mick Mulvaney joining us.